How's it going, everyone? It's Sam. Today we're going to be talking about something that's really important that just happened from a technical level. We're going to be looking at Solana. We'll be looking at Bitcoin. We have with us Tyler Hill. I'm going to put his information underneath the video. He's a great TA, a guy that nailed the bottom on Solana. So if you want to listen through to the end, I think it's really important to do that. If you want to trade cryptocurrency, there's a link to Margex underneath the video where you can trade Bitcoin, you can trade Solana, you can trade all different kinds of assets, and they have an airdrop going on right now. There's also a link to CoinW as well, where you can trade on leverage. You can also trade via spot. Right now, we are right under the resistance, so we may be getting a breakout soon. CoinW also has a pretty big airdrop going on right now. And last thing, if you want a ticket to Bitcoin Nashville, they still have a discount code underneath the video, about 4 lines down or 5 lines down, because we'll also include Tyler's channel. So definitely check out all that information, and let's get into the video. Tyler, thanks so much for coming back on the channel. Really appreciate you coming in.
What's up, guys? What's up? What's up? Back again.
Yeah, glad to have you back. By popular demand, every time that we talk about Solana, people want you back on. Maybe we can start, though, outside of Solana. Obviously, like, the market's rallying. Bitcoin's sitting right under 65, keeps on tapping 65. Maybe you can give us a little explanation for, like, what's happening right now, why it's looking pretty bullish.
Sure. Okay, so let me get the charts pulled up here. So, yeah, it's honestly been looking really good. And Bitcoin made a move that I don't think people recognize was extremely important over the last couple of days. Now, yes, I am known to somewhat exaggerate things sometimes, but this was extremely important. And what I want to highlight is what happened right back here. So today is, of course, the 16th, and this kind of somewhat happened over the course of like the 12th to the 10th, okay, this little time frame back here. And what that was is that we invalidated the potential of a massive double top. Okay, so what you can see is that, of course, we had peak number 1 that we put in back in March. We had peak number 2 that we put in right around that June 24th or June 9th, 2024 time zone. So this little area here, right? Now, of course, as this was being created, you have 2 peaks, you have a valley that obviously creates a double top, especially when you have such a strong zone of resistance like this. It's worth paying attention to. This is all-time high pressure. So, you know, starting to see some type of bearish structure form here was concerning, to say the least. And so, of course, what happened was that as we've created this valley, we created what's known as the MLS. This is a mid-level of support. It's the most important level for a double top, because quite simply, when you fall below that level, if you backtest and successfully backtest, you are going to open up the door for a big capitulation. And what happened here is that we came down to this MLS. We actually lost it. But the 2 times right here that we went to backtest it, we failed the backtest, meaning we recovered back above that zone, held it as support, continued back in the upward direction. And the fact that we did this not only was a strong testament to the bulls, but it also forced a lot of liquidations. Because what happened was that a lot of people started going short here. So if we go back right here, actually, let's go forward a little bit. If we go right here, right, let's draw out a little box. What happened is that a lot of people saw that this MLS got lost. They forgot that you need to double check the back test. You have to see if the back test is successful or not. And what happened is the moment we lost this, people started going short. And as this market started to recover and we started to move back in this upwards direction, all of those people who opened up those short trades right here got absolutely smashed. And so right now, what I think is a combination of bullish sentiment. You finally see bullishness, so people are starting to buy again. We just held support on a macro support level, and we're seeing liquidations forcing the price upwards. I think that we're in a good combination right now to continue this momentum. So yeah, definitely this has been much more of an important move than people realize. And that's why I think we're seeing so much bullishness right now.
Yeah, I like that a lot, especially because during that time too, I was coming at it from a more fundamental and, I guess, technical perspective. I was just thinking, okay, what's the point of max pain? Well, lower than the last point of pain. I didn't call it that that thing that you called it, MLS and NMLS or whatever it is. But like, okay, if we're looking at what can really freak out the market, well, we go slightly lower. There's a big new seller that's just dumping Bitcoin, but then that seems like an obvious bottom as well when they run out of Bitcoin, and then things turn around bullish. And obviously there have been several things, even from a political perspective, that have happened since then. But yeah, I was kind of along the same thinking as you, that it did seem like it was a bit of a bottom. Like, I think I called it at 55, like that was the bottom essentially. But yeah, it's been interesting to watch so far.
Totally. And well, one thing to consider as well is, like you said, from a fundamental basis, there were also things that happened, right? We saw Germany slow down, if not stop selling, maybe run out. I can't remember correctly at this little time zone. On top of that, a lot of the craziness about Mt. Gox kind of resided. You remember back in 2021 when everything was happening with China banning and unbanning and banning and unbanning, and we got to a point where, like, at some point people are just going to stop caring about this news. I'm curious as to when we're going to get to that point, because people always freak out about Mt. Gox and it kind of amounts to nothing. I think when the time comes that we stop caring about it is when the time that it's going to get a little ugly. But what ended up happening was around this time frame, people started to see their nerves about the whole Mt. Gox situation reside. Germany also slowed down, and at the same time, we saw a lot of our ETFs step back in. So we saw iShares step back in last week, 523 million of inflows, Fidelity 358 million of inflows. Grayscale was not keeping up to par of what they usually do, so it makes me question what's happening there. Negative 34 million, and all of this going to Bitcoin for the most part. And so when you combine all those things together, it's a perfect mix for, a bottom to form, basically.
Yeah. Definitely. Let's look at Solana though, because obviously you talk about Solana a lot on your channel, and from the bottom recently, it seems like it's bouncing pretty well. What are you seeing on that chart?
Yeah. So pulling this thing up here and kind of getting into this, I've definitely started to zoom out from a macro perspective. So a couple things. What we're seeing from Solana is stellar, in my opinion. I think it's extremely good. And I think that where we are right now, from a short and midterm perspective, is starting to get a little bit risky. Like, purchasing exactly at this moment that I'm talking definitely feels risky. From a macro perspective, things feel like they're building up really well. Now, what I mean by that is I've been paying the most amount of attention to what I'm seeing on this macro Fibonacci zone. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to remove everything real quick. And I just want to point out what's happening here. So, of course, we had our all-time high. We had that bear market low. What we saw is that, of course, Solana's price came up to and surpassed the 618 to 786 Fibonacci zone, the one I've spoken about here on the channel multiple times. And I've said that, listen, once you break this zone, the door of opportunity opens to the upside, in which, generally speaking, 1.272 Fib extensions are possible. That looks like $600 plus for Solana. That's always been my long-term thesis. And what I've said is that in order to get there, now that we've broken above this zone, it's very likely that we're going to back test it. We're going to try to flip this previous point of resistance into support. RS flips are one of the most fundamentally strong aspects of any pump at all. You break previous point of resistance and you hold them as support. You break them, hold them, break them, hold them. And what we're doing right now is holding it. Now, does that mean it's going to continue? No, it doesn't guarantee that. But what we can see is that Solana's price has broken this zone and has back tested it now on 2 occasions, putting in a little double bottom here as well, which does seemingly put us in a spot to which, if this market can maintain, if we can get through the rest of summer without anything catastrophic happening, this easily could be Solana establishing this RS flip, putting us in a position to hopefully start to retest this previous all-time high around $264 to $250. So the fact that we're holding like this, the fact that we obviously are doing so well here is beautiful. And like I mentioned before, and I can mention in a second here, although the short term does feel a little bit more risky, the macro is getting more and more bullish, in my opinion.
Sure. Maybe going back to the chart, it looks like we're getting to maybe the upper end of that triangle. Do you think we'll break out, or do you think we just get stuck in there until the very end of it, which is like what, end of year?
Yeah. So, I mean, it actually does extend out quite far. It just kind of depends on how you look at it, right? We could be talking further than this chart's actually going to go, but I would assume we're looking at somewhere around February or March of 2025. Solana's not known to reach the ends of its wedges. It's just not something that it normally does. I've been looking at this thing once a day or twice a day for the last 4.5 years now, and it's just, or 3.5 years now. It just doesn't usually get that far. Usually for Solana, when you hit that 55 to 70% threshold, which is roughly this little area here, that's when Solana is going to look to break out. And that's the reason why whenever we were starting to pull back to the downside, as we entered into this 50% threshold, I was like, oh shit, okay, we might, things might get a little bit ugly here. But again, what we can see is we have this massive point of resistance, this huge zone of liquidity below us as we are now approaching it. And so in my opinion, all of the odds are pointing in the direction that Solana will break to the top side of this. That's what just the general odds are, but it's close. And the reason that I say that is that, yes, I do believe we're going to get the breakout to the upside of this at some given point, but is it right now? I don't know. We look at the RSI, 4-hour RSI is overextended into your top, your upper echelons. It's a little bit too high for me. Bollinger Bands, 4-hour chart, again, also overextended, a little bit too high for me. Even if we go out to the daily RSI, boom, daily RSI already extended back up to that 60 threshold, a little high. We look at our daily Bollinger Bands already sitting in the top side of that. We're 2 standard deviations away from that 20 simple moving average. Generally, that's the zone in which we will start to pull back, right? You saw what happened once we started to extend into it right here. We got that pullback. That is exactly what rejected us back to the downside off of that wedge. It easily could be preparing us for the same thing. And so is it going to happen right now? there is no way of knowing. I honestly don't know. And I'm not doing a lot of buying on Solana right here. But at the end of the day, I think it will happen eventually. So I don't think it matters too much, honestly.
Okay. Yeah. So one strategy that I've used is when it's around 120, 125, I've been going on low leverage. And I don't know if other people do this. I oftentimes don't set stop losses. I'll put my leverage to be where I want my stop loss to be. So if we're at 120, if I know that there's strong support around 100, I'll do a 4x leverage. So that way my liquidation point's right in the low 90s. Technically it would be 90, but there's some fees. So it might bump up to 91 or something. So that way, if we get like a scam wick that goes down to 98, I'm safe. But I've been looking at the bottom of the range to open long positions, and it's done well so far. But obviously we're past that level now. Would you suggest buying if people have like a couple month time frame or a year time frame, or just, wait to see if you can get one more time at 130?
Yeah, I definitely think if you have a long-term time frame, this is a decent time to be buying because of what I said about earlier. We are still in the process of backtesting and trying to establish support on this macro zone. So because of that, that does, in a macro sense, provide this is a good time to be doing a purchase. Another thing to consider, historically speaking, from Solana, whenever you are at the top of macro trends and you enter into any sideways or descending channels, that is about 68 to 75% it ranges a signal that you're going to get a breakout to the upside. These are typically continuation channels more often than not. And so knowing that based off of history, we will break to the upside of this at some given point, obviously that's a good thing. But what I will say is that from a really short-term time perspective, this is a very risky moment because we might pull back. One thing to consider is that, Solana is approaching this micro 618 to 786 Fibonacci zone. Not only are we approaching it, but we're literally sitting directly at it. We got the close at it directly yesterday, and you can see that it's on the money. And when you get a rejection of that nature, which is when you close directly at a level like that, it's establishing dominance to some degree to say like, hey, this is a real resistance zone. It's not going to be easy. RSI is overextended, Bollinger Band's overextended, MACD's overextended. We could possibly get a pullback here. And so in the very short term, definitely proceeding with caution. Macro, midterm, long term, super bullish. And I definitely think, again, you have enough patience and a good time frame. This is a good time to buy.
Okay. Well, we have Bitcoin Nashville next week. Markets are kind of pumping. Apparently, ETH ETFs are going to start trading on Tuesdays, what I've heard, maybe a week from now. What's your just general sentiment? We'll just end with this. What's your general sentiment right now in the market after we've come up a little bit after it seemed like it was end of times?
Yeah. How do I frame this? Like, I'm bullish, but I know what's happened historically. What I know is that summertime suck. It's never really changed. It's not been all that different. And so in my opinion, where we are right now is we are still recovering. It's not like things are like super, super bullish and things are going parabolic. We're setting new highs. No, at the end of the day, we're just recovering right now some of the loss that we've seen throughout the rest of summer. And so because of that, knowing July and August historically are not the best months for crypto, knowing that there is unclarity, there's uncertainty, there's not clarity, there are still things that are sitting out there, knowing that the last ETF that launched dumped the market. Not for long, but it did dump the market for a little while. Things we did see that Buy the Rumor Sell the News event happen. And so because of those things, I'm definitely still being wary. Like, yes, I have been accumulating. Yes, I will continue to accumulate. Yes, I think it's a good time to purchase from a macro perspective, but I'm more cautious now than normal, quite simply because I know that summer times are full of tricks. These are the easiest times to be manipulated, quite simply because in the moments where you don't know what's going to happen, it's easy to convince you something's going to happen. So when no one knows what's going on, then the market kind of pumps a little bit. It's so easy for everyone to jump back in saying, oh, it's bullish, bullish, bullish. Then we see liquidations. And so because of that, I'm proceeding with caution. I know that in, a year from now, roughly, we will have seen higher highs than we are now. That's pretty obvious to me. I don't think there's a question about that. And so because of that, I'm very willing to purchase now, but I'm surely proceeding with caution because at the end of the day, summertime, things could start getting weird and cause a lot of manipulation, liquidations, weird movements that I don't feel like dealing with, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. And part of it comes down to like how much did you stack? Like how aggressive were you? Because obviously we were very aggressive. We have exposure outside of our bags too with our channel. So that makes sense. Tyler, thanks so much for coming back on the channel. We'll have to have you on probably next week because we're going to be seeing you in person. But yeah, we'll put links to you underneath the video along with links to Margex and to CoinW and to the Bitcoin conference in case you want to buy a ticket and you want a discount code. There's a link. Yeah, appreciate it. And we'll see you in the next one. Bye.
Peace.